Friday, I'm Tom, and the Colorcast is on the air now from CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System, for Friday night, the 12th of June, 1998. The great singer Gloria Estefan is here tonight. A bit later on, Mitch Albom, and the story of a reunion with a teacher in his final years that has now become, I believe, the second best-selling book in all America. You know, when I put my foot in my mouth, I do it big time. And I did it here last night. You remember I had these quotes, exact quotes from famous people, and I kind of highlighted Dan Quayle, the former vice president. And I had a letter today from a fellow back in Washington, D.C. via email who signed his name Robert Kennedy. And I take him at his word. I'm sure it's no relation to the late senator from New York and brother of the late president. But he points out in his research the line that I used last night about Dan Quayle saying that when he visited Latin America, he wished he had studied Latin so he could converse with those people. It's a very funny line, but according to Mr. Kennedy, it never happened. It was part of a comedy show back in Washington, he writes, back in 1989. It later became a topic of a joke used by either Jay Leno or David Letterman in late-night television, and then was picked up in the quote section of Newsweek magazine and then took on a life of its own. So, and as he says, I enjoy a Dan Quayle joke as much as the next guy, but let's give the guy his due. If he didn't do it, he didn't do it. So I thank Mr. Kennedy. I take him at his word. I apologize to the Dan Quayle family and Dan Quayle's fans. And if anybody's offended, again, you have my apologies. I thought I should have checked it. You know, I got on the congressman for not checking on the death of Bob Hope, and I stuck my own foot in my own mouth here last night, and I've gone to the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and called myself a moron. And I don't want any more email on this topic. There was a boy who worked in the produce, the clever segue. You notice right from the apology to the Prince of Blends, king of all late night. Not the entire kingdom, though, just this little restricted area of the late night kingdom. There are others who toil in the kingdom. There was a boy who worked in the produce section of a market. Man came in, he asked to buy a half a head of lettuce. And the young boy told this man, he says, we only sell whole heads of lettuce here. And the man said, look, I don't need a whole head, only a half. And the boy explained that he would have to ask the manager. So he walked into the back room and he said, you know, there's some moron out there who wants to buy only a half a head of lettuce. And as he finished saying this, he turned around to find the man standing right behind him. So he quickly said, and this gentleman wants to buy the other half. The manager okayed the request. The young man went on, or the man went on his way. And later the manager said to the boy, he said, you know, he says, you almost got yourself into a lot of trouble there, but I must say, I was impressed with the way you got out of that situation. You think on your feet, and we like that around here. By the way, son, where are you from? And the boy said, sir, he said, I'm from Minnesota. He says, oh, really? He says, why did you leave Minnesota? The boy said, well, he says, all they've got up there is whores and hockey players. The man says, well, my wife is from Minnesota. The boy says, really? What team did she play for? King of all late night. You know what dust is, don't you? It's mud with all the juice squeezed out of it. The great singer Gloria Estefan is here tonight. What a great story she has to tell. And then Mitch Albom, and another wonderful story about a reunion with his teacher after some years of being apart. And of course, you on the toll-free. I'm Tom. You're watching CBS. Thanks for catching our pictures as we fly them through the air. Mitch Albom is a prize-winning Detroit Free Press sports writer and host of a nationally syndicated radio program. His newest book is called Tuesdays with Morrie. It tops the bestseller list. I said it was in second place. It has been in first place now for 6 weeks, and I apologize to you for that. I've made many gaffes here this week. I'm having senior moments. Please forgive me. In any event, this book has topped the nation's bestseller list because of its wisdom, compassion, and downright humanity, and I'm pleased to welcome Mitch to our program here at CBS.
Thanks,
Talk to me about this man, Morrie Schwartz. He was your teacher at Brandeis.
Mm-hmm. College professor of mine back in the 70s. We were very close. He was that one teacher that sort of
made a difference, yeah.
Exactly. More like an uncle to me than a teacher. Took all the classes he offered. In fact, we had to invent one by my senior year because I'd run out of classes to take with him. Had every intention of staying in touch with him when I graduated. And then, as often happens when people leave school and get involved in their own lives, one year turned to 2 to 3 to 16, and I lost complete track of him. Didn't really exchange a word with him until one night, 16 years after graduation, I was flipping through the TV dials and happened to catch the Nightline program
with Ted Koppel.
And there on the screen talking to Ted Koppel was a withered, more sickly-looking version of this man I had loved so many years ago, Morrie Schwartz, talking to Ted about what it was like to die from Lou Gehrig's disease. It was only that moment I found out that he was ill.
So he had Lou Gehrig's disease, and he knew he was going to die. And when you saw this, what did you do?
Well, you can imagine your emotions at a time like that. And first, you're horrified that he's going to die.
Sure, and secondly, I could have called and
you're ashamed of yourself.
Wash in guilt, sure.
So I called him the next day, and I went out to see him. And I really only intended to go one time, but I was so taken with his attitude about life, how he had lived it, how he was dying, his serenity with even his terrible hand that fate had dealt him, that when I flew back on the plane, I said, you know, I'm 37, I'm perfectly healthy. He's 78, he's dying. He's 10 times happier than I am. So what's the matter with this picture? And I began a series of visits back, one and again, until pretty soon it was every Tuesday for the last 5 months of his life, to try to find the answer to that question.
And what was it about him as a teacher that made him special?
Well, it was funny. After I wrote the book, I had probably hundreds of people call me and say, I thought I was his favorite student. You know, he had that way of sort of making everybody who ever had feel like he was the first student he ever had. It went beyond the class. I mean, he taught sociology, and sociology in the 70s gave you a lot of leeway to sort of invent your own classes. I remember one time he even came in and just sat there for 15 minutes, didn't say a word. And everybody in the class just got agitated. You know, is he going to talk? What's going to happen? You know, he just sat and he watched everybody react. And then after 50 minutes, he said, now let's talk about how silence affects human beings. You know, and that began a whole discussion about that. So he was that kind of teacher, willing to take chances. But more what I think was his personality. He just believed that as long as he touched a couple of kids each year, he was doing something worthwhile. And he never aspired to, you know, become the dean or write big books about every kind of subject. It was enough to teach these classes for almost 30 years.
He was a happy man in his profession as a teacher. Now, on these Tuesdays when you would go to visit him over the period of 5 months, could you see him declining? Could you see him getting worse?
Well, as you know, Lou Gehrig's disease is a very visual...
It's just awful. Listen, I had a next-door neighbor up in San Francisco. She got Lou Gehrig's disease, and I watched her. In her 80s, you know, this vibrant woman just fall apart. It's
well,
terrible.
Morrie called it a horrible, wonderful disease. Horrible because it basically eats your muscles and your nerves inch at a time, and yet your mind stays perfectly intact. So you can no longer blow your nose or wipe your eyes or bathe yourself or do the bathroom task, and yet you're fully aware of what's happening. The horror was the physical part. The wonderful was that he had all this time to say goodbye, to set things straight, to talk to the people he loved and tell them what
We've got some pictures of you and he up on the screen now. I assume these were taken during your visits with him, right?
Right, in the same little office, in the same little room, in the same little house in West Newton, Massachusetts every week. Morrie even held his own funeral prior to his death. Talk about time left. You know, he said, you know, he had gone to a funeral. He said, what a waste. You know, they say all these nice things about you. You're not even there. I want to hear what people have to say about me now. So he invited everybody over on a Sunday, and they all stood up and gave, you know, nice big speeches. But at the end, the deceased rose, and he got to thank everybody who was there and told them what they had meant to him as well. And that was kind of Morrie's way. You know, he'd take regular things and turn them on their end.
And by the way, didn't he know who you were? Hadn't he been to Detroit and picked up the paper and seen one of your columns?
Actually, which I didn't write in the book, he told me after I had started these visits and we had really kind of been reunited at the heart, he said, you know, I did come through Detroit about 10 years ago, saw your column, and wrote you a letter. Well, unfortunately, he sent it to the newspaper. And if you know anything about sports departments and newspapers...
Well, the same here at CBS. And I'm not knocking the CBS mailroom, but I mean, things they get lost. They get misplaced.
Exactly. You got about 5% chance of actually getting through to me. Well, he thought I was ignoring him. I mean, he didn't know. You send a letter to the newspaper, you're supposed to get a response. So for these 10 years, he thought that, you know, wow, I guess Mitch has just kind of turned into a different person. And yet, he was still willing to forgive all that and forget it when I showed up on his doorstep with 6 months left in his life.
Now, as you went for the visit, what was it, weekly or monthly?
Yeah, weekly.
Weekly,
every
okay.
Tuesday.
So for Tuesday, you fly from Detroit
to Boston.
What would you talk about? I mean, would you set an agenda one Tuesday for the next Tuesday? You know, tell me something about how you determine what you would cover with him on each successive visit.
I mean, the thing was, every one of us has asked ourselves, how would I change my life if I had 6 months left to live? But we never really mean it because we don't have 6 months left to live. So we say, I guess I would do this. Well, he really did.
He knew the simple truth. We are all going to die. I mean, you and I know we're going to die, but we don't believe it now. He believed it.
Exactly. He believed, and that was one of the things he taught. He said, if you could learn to live your days really believing that today might be your last, you would really live your life much differently. And so I was able to ask him a week at a time, and the way the book works is that sort of each Tuesday is a different topic, be it marriage and children, or how much should you work in your life, or envy of what other people have, or the fear of aging, or the avoidance of death, but seen through the eyes of someone who really was down to his final days and was able to say to me, Mitch, this counts, this doesn't count, you think this counts now, but when you get to this point where I'm sitting, it's not going to matter at all.
Interesting. Like, what didn't count for him that counts for you?
Well, I'm trying to change it, but certainly work, money, accomplishment. You know, Morrie ceased to buy anything the day he found out he had his disease. That was
probably
the last
on
day
your
he spent
deathbed. You don't care whether you had a Cadillac or a Chevrolet.
No.
Or a 4,000 square foot house or a 2,000 square foot house.
And you know that old expression, no one ever uttered their last words, I should have worked more. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, the people who came to see Morrie were people who he had touched and had relationships with, not necessarily who he had professional contact with. And it started to dawn on me, I was really a workaholic. I was working 20 hours a day. And, you know, I had a lot of people patting me on the back saying, you're doing the right thing. Look at all the accomplishments you're doing. Look what you've achieved for such a young age.
All those bylines, you know, the radio show. And
yeah, sure. Plenty of big paychecks and all the rest of it. But I started to realize that unless I want to die alone with my little pay stubs and my little awards or you know, pats on the back from people, I need to sort of reprioritize things. And that's what Tuesdays with Morrie is about.
So what's changed in your life, Mitch Albom?
Well, I've tried to cut down the amount of work I do. It's funny, I end up spending more time talking about this book than anything else. But
yeah, but this will pass, you know.
And I feel I'm kind of like a student teacher on this class. I try to spend more time with my wife now, which didn't used to be as much of a priority as it is. We're trying to have a family now, which didn't used to be a priority at all. You know, people are sometimes afraid to pick up this book, I think, because they think, if I read this little 190-page book, I'm going to have to quit my job and burn my clothes and sell my house and move to an ashram in Oregon and chant all day. And that's not it at all. It's just about reprioritizing. You know, Morrie was for work. He liked the fact that I wrote for a newspaper. He just said, don't make it the #1 thing. First people, first family, first people that you love, compassion towards your community, get involved and give a little of yourself, and then put the other things in line.
Good for Morrie. Good for Morrie. It takes us too long to learn what Morrie found out the hard way, probably, huh? Or what Morrie knew all along.
Yeah.
Morrie knew all along.
It takes us too long to listen to Morrie.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, and he's right. All this material stuff that we collect means absolutely nothing. Your family means something. Your health certainly means something, you know. But all the rest.
He got a big kick one day. I bought him a headline, speaking you're in the television business, from Ted Turner, who was trying to buy a network at the time, maybe this one, for all I know.
I think he was trying to buy CBS.
And he came out with this quote saying, I don't want my tombstone to read, he never owned a network. And here's Morrie, you know, down to his final days, really thinking about what his tombstone should say. And he held the piece of paper and said, I think you might want to rethink this and come up with something better for his tombstone.
Yeah, exactly.
I think he was right.
Let me interrupt you for a second here. We have to pause for the sponsors and our stations. My guest is Mitch Albom. The book is called Tuesdays with Morrie. We'll be right back after these messages. To go on forever. I'm 62 years old. I'm a fairly young man. I'm not, I'm not a dying man. But I have more to look back on than I have to look forward to. And I don't want to spend whatever time I have. My father died at 67 of brain cancer, so I'm 62 years old, so you never know what's going to happen here. And I would like to spend whatever time I have left, 20 years, please God, 5 years, whatever, doing things that don't include coming into a television station every night, that include my granddaughter, my family, my dog, Italy, travel, friends, stuff like that. That doesn't involve coming in to do television every night.
Yeah.
What about you, Vicki? What if you knew you had 6 years or 6 months or 24 hours?
Tom, as I started to speak to the delightful young man I spoke to before, I just came to my own confrontation with my own mortality. I've discovered I have a serious heart problem. So instead of doing all the civic things and so forth that I had intended to do this weekend, I came into New York City. I'm staying at a friend's apartment. I went to see Bob Newhart tonight. I howled, I laughed, I quelled, and I did a lot of things in the city that I had done in my 20s. I walked around, I had a wonderful time, and I realized that what I really needed was a break from the fear. And now I'm going back and I'll get done what has to be done. But for a few minutes, and that's all really it is, I've come to terms with the fact hey, I'm alive. To hell with the rest of it. I'll manage. And by the way, don't leave. I need you.
I understand. You know, hey, I am many. You might not see me every night, Vicki, but I will always be for you right around the corner. Please, please believe me.
You always have been, and bless you, my dear.
You know, you remind me of my aunt very much. I had an aunt who had cancer, and she battled this cancer for years and years and years, and finally it got her, you know, in her 80s. But she would always say to my mother, this is my Aunt Vi, she'd say, Marie, cancer is out there in the street somewhere. It's not in this house. In this house, there is life and happiness and joy, and the cancer is out there somewhere.
Very similar to Morrie having so many people coming to visit him, including myself. I mean, I joked I called Tuesdays with Morrie because Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays were booked with other people, and I couldn't get in. And I asked him one time, I said, you know, you're running out of everything. You're running out of time. You're running out of energy. How come you spend so much time teaching and giving? He said, giving is what makes me feel alive, not taking, giving. And you realize that, you know, we think like we have to have more and pull more in, but actually what really makes you feel like you're accomplishing something and worthwhile being here is the times that you give something back.
All of us have more money than we have time. All of us. Vicki, I thank you. Newhart was at the Carnegie Hall, huh?
Oh, he was wonderful.
Yeah, I saw him with Letterman the other night.
And Joy Behar, and it was and Alan King, and he got a Friars Award and the whole
great.
9 yards, and it's blessings. It was very good.
Vicki, you have a great weekend, okay? And good luck to you, kid.
Thanks.
Good night.
Kid, I'm 61, darling.
Good night, kid. I'll talk.
Just a little.
All right. Good night, kid. I'll talk
Take
to you
care.
later.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Vicki.
Thanks for coming in tonight, Mitch. It's a great book and a great story. You tell it very well, and I appreciate your time, sir.
My pleasure,
Have a good
Tom.
weekend.
Thank you
Mitch
for having me.
Albom is the guest. It's only about 195 pages, a fast read, but it'll stay with you for the rest of your life. It's called Tuesdays with Morrie. Now, this break. There is probably a lot to be learned from people like Morrie Schwartz that Mitch Albom talked about tonight, who are in the second half, as they say, final stages of their life. I think one thing that I've learned in the last 10 or 12 years, you can have anything you want in this world, but you can't have everything you want. And much of the last 12 years of my life has been making choices as to what I can have and what I can't have, and trying to pick the things that are important to me and discarding those that really get in my way rather than help me along. On Monday night, Frank Sinatra Jr. in the first interview since his father passed away. And on a lighter note, there are very few personal problems that can't be solved with a sufficient application of high explosives. Have a good weekend, everybody.